It's summertime.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We're so excited here at Gilford Library to have Tom Farmen, author of Bessie's story, Watching the Lights Go Out, to talk about his book and to tell Bessie's stories. We love stories here at the library, so this is going to be a good one. If you haven't read the book yet, it's amazing, and he's got some copies over there. Tom is the headmaster emeritus of the Rumsey Hall School, and he's a board member and active volunteer of the New Hampshire Special Olympics, which he had asked me to mention because it's something that he really cares about. We're very excited to have Bessie herself here tonight. If you haven't met her yet, she's adorable, and you should give her a pet. We're also recording tonight for the Lakes Region Public Access, and it'll be up on the library YouTube page if you want to show your friends. So, without any further ado, thank you, Tom.
Thank you. I want to echo his thanks for coming out tonight and sharing an evening. Your lives are really busy, and hopefully at the end of this, yes, sir?
Could you use the mic, please?
I don't know that there's much volume on this mic, so how about if I speak just a little louder? Can you hear me? Is that good? All right, well, I want to thank you for coming out tonight, and if I do my job correctly, you'll all leave here with a little more enthusiasm, a little more bounce in your step, maybe a little more determination and resilience. Who can define the word magic? Simply, yes?
Magic is like when you believe something and other people don't see it, and you believe that it's real. It's like fairies. They have magic.
Fairies are magical. That's good. Thank you. Good start. Anybody else? Definition of magic? How do you know when you see something that's magic? It's hard to believe. We're going to go with that. It's hard to believe. What did you say?
You don't understand how it happened.
Exactly. How much do you think this weighs, this little piece of wood? If you had to guess. An ounce, right? It's almost weightless, actually, like a feather. No matter how I try, I cannot get this to balance on the end of my finger. If I let go of it, it instantly just falls to the ground. If I take this belt, which is made of fairly substantial canvas and some leather, so I increase the weight probably 20 times, now that same piece of wood stays on my finger. Are there any engineers here tonight? If there are, don't say anything. Because I know there's a scientific engineering explanation to this. But I'm going to go with magic, and I'm going to introduce this presentation with that word magic, because I can't think of another way to describe what Bessie demonstrates on a daily basis. I'm going to show 3 or 4 minutes of video to get you started. These are videos of Bessie in her element. These were all taken in the last year, and she's completely blind in every one of these.
There is a permanent wrinkle in the middle of Bessie's forehead, the result of opening her eyes as wide as she absolutely can for most of her waking hours. Bessie was 4 years old and I was 61 when we learned that she was gradually going blind. She appears to believe her relentless effort will pay off and the world will somehow light up again if she just opens those white, filmy eyes wide enough. This book is about our charming, brave Chocolate Lab's 2.5-year transition to sightlessness and her adjustment to a world of darkness. In the process, Bessie unwittingly became an expert mentor and teacher for the high-wire act of growing older with grace and optimism. Because of her, I've become more watchful, mindful, compassionate, and ingenious, dreaming up new ways to make her life better. Atta girl. This is our story. Want to play hockey? Good girl. Drop. You want to play soccer today? All right, here we go. Go. Sit. 1, 2, 3. Got.
This is taken in the ocean, this next shot.
Would you like to go again? Would you like to go again? Okay, go. Go. She'll find it eventually. Here we go. Here, Bess.
Next time you're faced with a really challenging task, one that you're ready to throw up your hands and say, I just can't do this, remember this video.
Come on, Bess. Okay. Right there. There you go. Come on. Okay. Come on.
So now you know Bessie normally. You know her outside of a place like this where she's really well behaved and kind of tame. What I want to do is lead you from the transition, through the transition of when we first received the diagnosis up through today. And to do that, I'm going to read excerpts from the book. There are 31 chapters. I'm going to read excerpts from 9. Not 9 chapters. I'm going to read excerpts from 9 chapters. And I'll, in the process, I'm going to show you some pictures, so you'll begin to see what inspired this story, and you'll get a sense of how much I've learned from this dog. This is the very first page of the book. It says, before we begin. When my wife Ashley and I visited the kennel in a rural New Hampshire town to select a chocolate Labrador puppy, we had some reservations. The parents of the litter were described as healthy, purebred labs. The parents of the litter were described as healthy, purebred labs, but the mother was mysterious, aloof, and detached, not to mention that her hair was falling out. The father was out of the picture, apparently having disappeared like a deadbeat dad who'd slipped out of town before the police arrived. Then the kennel's owner opened the small pen and 8 adorable lab puppies poured out, slipping and sliding all over each other like fish from a net, all except one. The last pup peered out at us, inched her way into the sunlight, and parked herself softly on Ashley's feet. That's the day we fell in love with Bessie. She was just 7 weeks old, and we already knew we had the perfect dog. This book begins 4 years later, when Bessie's perfection began rising to new levels. That's the day we brought her home. And if you've ever picked up a dog at a kennel, you know that 7 weeks is too early. It's 8 weeks minimum, more like 10 normally. They let us have her at 7. It should have been a bell ringing in our head, but we couldn't resist. How could you? And we subsequently found out that of those 9 puppies, 4 of them went blind. So there was obviously some overbreeding going on at this kennel. It subsequently shut down. It's no longer in business. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about a question I was asked by a 7th grade boy later that kind of brings us back to this point. Same day, maybe 10 weeks old. And this is Bessie at age 1. How many lab owners are there here? Own or once at one time? Okay, so you know this look, right? Big heart, low IQ. There it is. That's Bessie at 1. 2, Bessie at 2 years old, eyes are perfect. And this is Bessie at about 3.5. And it was right about this time that we got the diagnosis. And that's when the book began. The first chapter is called Time Remaining. And the quote at the beginning, "The afternoon knows what the morning never suspected." Robert Frost. I see you nodding your heads, right? We're all thinking about how true those words are. Turning 61 was a wonderful surprise. Simple pleasures were magnified. I became a better listener. Judgments were forgotten and forgiven, and I talked less because there was really not much point. Oops, time to wake up. There was really not much point. By 61, a person has experienced most of the personal and universal joys and heartaches life can serve up, either directly or with 1 degree of separation. By 61, you get it, or you should. There's a faint drumbeat in the room when a person passes 60. It's called TR, time remaining. You realize how quickly time passed between 40 and 60, and understand that by some esoteric law of physics, the next 20 years will be a blur. But even with all this life experience, I'm stunned when Ashley returns from a routine visit to the veterinarian with unsettling news. Our silly 4-year-old Bessie is losing her sight. According to her doctor, this sweet dog will be blind in 12 months. She has something called progressive retinal atrophy, an inherited disease that causes a degeneration of the retinas and results in permanent, untreatable blindness. The doctor speculates that she currently has approximately 85% of her vision in daylight and 50% when it's dark. On walks after sunset, she bumps into things, stumbles occasionally, and takes it slow. I thought that was just Bessie's style, but now I know better. Yet with each morning, when the sun comes up, she's fearless and full speed. Yet with each morning walk, I look for a hint of fading glory. Almost subconsciously, I realize Bessie is my GPS for the coming years of advancing age. And that was the moment where this inversion took place. First 4 years of Bessie's life, we were teaching her how to be a good dog. Sit, stay, come. Since then, roles were reversed. She became the teacher. She was teaching us how you manage this process of aging. Watch me, she was saying. I'll show you how it's done. And right at that point, I started to keep track of the things I was learning. I started keeping a diary and recording the lessons I was getting from Bessie just by watching her live her normal daily life. It didn't start out as a book. That was the last thing on my mind, actually. It was a series of pep talks for me. Anybody have a question?
How old is she now?
She'll be 10 in May. Can you hear me all right? All right, good. Just wave if you can. All right. Ashley had done the research. I was kind of taking it day by day. Ashley went online, learned as much as she could about blind dogs, bought some books and read up on it. And one of the things she read was that blind dogs have a tendency to become depressed as their world gets darker and darker. I haven't seen any evidence of that. I frankly don't think that gene's in Bessie's DNA. But being good, proactive parents, we decided to have a sleepover. This chapter is called House Guests. The quote at the beginning, "What a hell of a heaven it will be when they get all these hypocrites assembled there." Mark Twain said that. So this picture wasn't taken in January, but the sleepover was in January. And you know, it's dark in the morning, it's dark early in the afternoon in January, and so a sleepover seemed to be a good way to raise her spirits. The holidays had passed, thank goodness, and we were into the winter. Her two best canine friends happened to be Tula and Tui, the dogs owned by our sons. Both are female. Tula's a seasoned pit bull mutt from Brooklyn. Our older son Tyler rescued her as a puppy during his college days when the couple who owned her broke up and couldn't decide who would take the dog. Tula spent multiple hours a day chained to a post by a Fort Greene brownstone till our son adopted her. She has the Venus symbol for woman tattooed on her stomach. Tula was spayed as a puppy, and this must have been a message to all of her suitors from Flatbush. Save your ammo, boys. She wears it well. Once a cheerful sweetheart, Tula's a bit crotchety now at 11 years old, gray in the face, but still beautifully sleek, like some aging Hollywood star who spends hours each day with a personal trainer and a nutritionist and is close friends with a cosmetic surgeon. You know, the type who looks great from a distance, but more like something from a wax museum up close. Tula's a sweetie, but her demeanor can convey a strong sense of entitlement. And as you know, Tula is the one on your right. Our other guest is Tui, a border collie, named after a large honey-eating bird of New Zealand where she was born. Our younger son, Trevor, traded a cord of firewood for Tui in Wanaka on the South Island, where he spent a year after college. She flew home with him to New York, and after almost 2 days of air travel in a crate, she walked out of baggage claim and pooped and peed in the terminal at JFK. I like this dog right away. Tui's a genius, bred to herd sheep, hundreds of them, all by herself. If there were colleges for dogs, Tui would get a scholarship to all the Ivies and Stanford. Simply stated, she loves all people and hates all other animals except Bessie. That's because Bessie lets Tui do anything to her, including dragging her around by the scruff of the neck. Sometimes I just have to turn away. Over the weekend, Ashley and I go for long walks with the dogs, wrestle with them, build snowmen, watch football games, take naps, you know, regular January things. And as the hours pass, I realize that Bessie, the youngest, is acting like the oldest. She thoughtfully relents to everything, like a lost breed of politician who knows how to compromise and get along with diverse groups. This trio of dog characters meshes like a three-part harmony because Bessie defers. I don't think it's insecurity or lack of confidence that makes Bess behave this way. She's like a Buddha who's found enlightenment and simply wants others to be happy and content. Here she is at the age of 4, losing her eyesight day by day, and these older fools are worrying about who sleeps where and who gets the cookies. Once again, this humble dog shines a bright light on our world from her increasingly dark one. Her message, wake up. 99% of the things we do each day are of little or no importance. The only things that really matter are those we do to make life a little better for others. I wish Bessie could look in a mirror and see how beautiful she is. I don't think that's going to happen, but somehow I think she knows she's getting lovelier by the day. You can see it in her eyes. Any questions? So this chapter's, we made it through the winter, January, February, March, we're into April now. And this chapter's called Spring Training. We quote at the beginning, what day is it? It's today, squeaked Piglet. My favorite day, said Pooh. It's today? Oh, my favorite day. A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh, of course. To better understand Bessie's plight, I put on sunglasses one dark evening and walked through our backyard. It's frightening, really. The farther I get from familiar objects, the more I bump into things, the harder it is to negotiate my path. I throw a ball into the darkness and can't find it. The urge to remove the sunglasses is overpowering. It affords me another chance to admire how stoically Bessie is coping. When Bessie comes to me with a ball in her mouth, I'm more likely now to drop what I'm doing, and give her what she wants, my time. I recall feeling somewhat the same way with our children when they were young and asked me to play catch or go fishing. I knew the day would come when they'd outgrow their interest in being with Dad, so I almost always said yes. With Bessie, it's different. Her ability will disappear before her interest fades, and I can only imagine how terribly confusing and heartbreaking that will be for her. So here I am again, always saying yes. I tend to see everyone in my life now as I see Bessie. That is, in the bright, shining light of the moment. The celebration of today is all I can be sure of. Bessie teaches me, be where you are. We worked in the same boarding school for 42 years. We lived on campus and in school housing. And one of the traditions at the school was something called the Blue Dog Parade, because at the top of the school crest, there was a little blue Labrador retriever, and so we became the Blue Dogs. That was our nickname. The Blue Dog Parade was held annually on the first day of the fall athletic season, when we'd all dress our dogs up in school colors and parade them through the campus to get the kids fired up for that first game. This is Bessie's last Blue Dog Parade. I don't think she can see very well at this time, but she's wearing an Elizabethan collar around her waist that used to go around her neck when she injured herself. And you know, those big things that prevent a dog from biting or licking their wounds? Yeah, right. So this is a cloth one, not a big plastic one. And then she's wearing a school t-shirt, and Ashley put a bright scarf on her to just dress her up a little bit. So this was a highlight. The quote at the beginning for this chapter, which is called Back in School: "Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened." Dr. Seuss said that. Good advice. A few days after the parade, with pleasant memories guiding her, Bessie follows a group of kids from the athletic field about half a mile back to the main campus, and eventually makes her way to the steps outside my office. She appears as if she's on vacation, has just landed at the airport, and is waiting for her ride. Bessie spends about an hour there picking up head scratches and hugs the way a street musician collects dollars and spare change from passersby for a well-played melody. I watch her from my office window for a while and smile at the grace she conveys surveying a landscape that she can't really see, but understands. For Bessie, the beginning of every day is like the start of a brilliant sun-kissed morning after a heavy rainstorm, when the world is scrubbed clean and filled with endless promise and freshness. She heads out the door each morning with boundless high hopes and great faith, no, blind faith, that this will be the best day of her life. If Bessie could talk, I'm pretty sure she'd simply say, "Be strong and spread joy." That's a pretty good message from a dog whose world's getting darker each day. What do you notice about this picture? Her eyes are fully dilated. You must be in the medical field.
I am.
Okay. Yeah, her eyes. This is a bright sunny day on a white ice lake in January. Her eyes, her pupils should be tiny, tiny pinpricks. Instead, they are dilated, the full size of the eye, let as much light as possible in for those retinas that are decaying slice by slice. She's got this is a hockey puck that she's dropping. This chapter is called Annual Checkup, and the quote at the beginning: "There are only two forces in the world, the sword and the spirit. In the long run, the sword will always be conquered by the spirit." Napoleon Bonaparte said that. A year ago, we were told that Bessie's vision was about 85% in daylight and 50% in dim light. Now, she perceives about 50% of her world in the sun and more like 10% when it's dark. Now, we're still playing retrieving games. Obviously, I'm hitting pucks for her on the ice. I'm throwing, kicking, batting balls for her. And it's a different game now. Sometimes it takes her a few minutes to track down the ball, but she always finds it. Trouble now is that when she locates the ball and turns around with it in her mouth, she can't see me. Poor thing has found her trophy, but she's a retriever, and finding the prize is only half the process. She knows I'm out there somewhere, so her nose goes up in the air like a periscope, her ears perk up like antennae, and she searches. There is a fearlessness in Bessie's spirit. She refuses to give up the games she loves, no matter how difficult or puzzling they become. A lot of instinct is at work here, but ample doses of courage, resilience, and defiance are also in play. Bessie and I are performing a delicate balancing act. At what point does this game become a mockery of a great dog's fading glory? At what point does it become more comical than productive, more cruel than pleasant? I take my cue from Bessie. Somehow this wonderful girl can still speak with her eyes. And based on my voice, she knows where to find me and returns the ball to my feet. And she looks at me with a penetrating, haunting stare. And though I know she cannot really see me, her message is clear. Don't you dare stop hitting balls from me, ever, no matter how hopeless I may seem. Bessie reminds me that we are defined more by our spirit and effort than by our results. I'm not sure if Bessie's blind in this picture. She's about 6 years old, I think. That's back on the front porch where that first picture was taken when she was a tiny little puppy. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that depressed gene ever surfaced. I don't think it ever came out. She's smiling away, happy as can be. I'm going to skip the title of this chapter because it gives away the punchline at the end, but the quote at the beginning gives you a little hint. Joy, temperance, and repose, slam the door on the doctor's nose. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said that. Most days I'm the first one downstairs in the morning. Sometimes I sneak around quietly like a commando, tiptoe to the mudroom where Bessie sleeps, and stealthily open the door. No matter how silent I try to be, Bessie is always on her feet, nose to the door, and looking up with empty eyes that are somehow still filled with expectation. Her rapidly advancing blindness doesn't seem to be eroding her spirit or enthusiasm, and her positive energy is uplifting, like strong coffee on New Year's morning. She behaves as if she believes each day that her vision will return as soon as she steps into the backyard. Sadly, Bessie confirms her blindness each morning when she walks into something like a planter or porch furniture. But she deals with it as a mere inconvenience and heads enthusiastically into the day. The same is true when we let her out in the afternoon or the evening. There is a level of energy in Bessie now that we have trouble understanding. She can't wait to get out to the apple orchard that grows behind the perennial garden behind our house. My initial thought was that the open space of the orchard empowered a feeling of independence in Bessie, that she somehow remembered there was lots of open space back there among the scattered apple trees. I was wrong. Bessie is attracted to the orchard for the alcohol. This cagey, wily 6-year-old lab has figured out that the apples lying on the ground are filled with fermented apple cider. Like an alcoholic on the sly, Bessie slowly and casually saunters into the orchard and then devours the nectar-filled fruit. It may be my imagination, but I swear Bessie is catching a buzz before breakfast. And then again in the afternoon, and definitely before dinner. She is self-medicating her grief about going blind. I can't say I ever saw Bessie stagger or behave inappropriately, but she sure seemed happier and less concerned during the fall. Eventually the apples rotted and disappeared into the ground or under the snow, and Bessie got her drinking problem under control. She's selective in her choice of poison. I sometimes hold a glass of wine in her direction, and she turns away. So I guess we only have to worry during apple season. What a piece of work this dog is.
And what was the title of that chapter?
Catching a Buzz.
Oh, yeah.
She asked what the title of the chapter was, Catching a Buzz. This is Kate. Kate's 4 years old. She's one of Bessie's really good friends. And if you read the back here, it says something animal hospital. Kate's dressed up like a vet. She's giving Bessie her examination. I love this picture because if you look up in the top left corner, Bessie's winking at us. She's saying, I know Kate's not a doctor, but she's having fun and I'm going to go along with it. So wink, wink, you know. One of the things that happen, if you're a dog owner, you know, when your pet's in the backyard, you shine the flashlight to find them and those eyes glow back at you. And it's such a relief to see that. You say, okay, I know where the dog is. Bessie's right eye was glowing, her left eye stopped, which is interesting. It means they didn't go at exactly the same time. And so this chapter is called Right-Eyed Bessie. And the quote at the beginning, there are some people who see a great deal and some who see very little in the same things. Thomas Henry Huxley said that. I sometimes wish I had filmed Bessie's transition to blindness. Her mannerisms are pretty much unchanged. Her body remembers what to do, but the graceful girl is now awkward at times. She's like a ballet dancer who never had to think about her movements in relation to space, gradually becoming clumsy. In some ways, our 6.5-year-old is in her prime. If you watch Bessie from a distance in an open field, you'll see a dog in full. The closer you get, the clearer her handicap. And when you get close enough to pat her, Bessie will flinch at the touch just for an instant, till she knows she's safe. And that's when you realize she can't see. And of course, those empty eyes that are turning white tell the story. I see and sense the world differently now. Moments of natural beauty are clearer, richer, more brilliant. Faces are portraits, each one a memorized masterpiece. Shadows are mysterious, fleeting, treasured images painted by the sun. I want to be sure that if the lights go out for me someday, I'll have a catalog of images in my memory bank just as Bessie does. In the meantime, we will continue to sit in the sun together and feel the world around us. If Bessie senses I'm next to her, she'll nudge me to scratch her ears, ears that are as soft as the oldest t-shirt in your dresser. And she'll sigh just like she did when she could see clearly, because with her eyes closed, she still can. I'm going to leave this picture up for the next chapter. But I'm not going to give you the title of this one either, because it gives away another punchline later on. The quote at the beginning, to me, is so poignant and so courageous. It was written by a young female author named Nicole Ray. When Nicole Ray was 27, she lost her eyesight rather suddenly. And the quote says, "When life's got you down, keep your head up. You can't see the ground anyway." How about that, huh? Wouldn't you like to meet her? I sure would. I really admire that kind of spirit. When we'd go to the doctor with Bessie, the vet, her blindness, we thought it was going to be a year. It turned out to be quite a bit longer than that. And so going to the vet with Bessie was like going with a rock star. The nurses, the clerical staff, the doctors, everybody would just stop what they're doing and come out and look at Bessie and kind of ask questions and touch her and pat her. They wanted to get close to see her eyes. And it was really kind of exciting. It was like having a famous family member. And we enjoyed that part of it. But Ashley and I have been wondering what the final test for blindness will be. What device the doctor might roll out to make a conclusive diagnosis. Ashley and I are pretty sure the lights have gone out for good, but there's nothing scientific about our analysis. It's just a sense we have. Expecting to see Bessie fit in some complicated high-tech device that allows us to peer into those two milky white holes on her sweet face, we are relieved to see the doctor walk in with a handful of cotton balls. Bessie must overhear us because her ears perk up. If there's a ball involved, she knows there's fun ahead. Not in this case, though. How ironic that the ultimate test for determining Bessie's utter blindness involves an element of her favorite activity. The vet stands about 5 feet away and one by one tosses half a dozen cotton balls at her face from different angles. She doesn't blink or flinch, not at all. She accepts each one like a tough boxer on the ropes with his hands down, taking punches in the late rounds. Those little pieces of fluff bounce off her nose, eyes, and forehead silently and painlessly. But in my mind, each one lands on the floor with a loud crash. The long, slow fade is over. What originally was supposed to take just 12 months has in fact stretched over 2.5 years. The tears well up in her eyes as the finality of the journey sinks in, but there are no tears from Bessie. She's sitting on the examination table with her eyes wide open, her ears at attention, sensing that someone is throwing mysterious things at her. She remembers that in the past there was a treat at the end of each doctor appointment, and her instincts tell her this visit is winding down. She's even drooling a bit in happy expectation of the cookies that are coming. When something winds down for Bess, that only means something else is winding up. When we get home, she jumps out of the car and begins dancing in circles when Ashley promises her a walk, and off they go, with Bessie leading the way, guided by a memory burned into that joyful place in her brain where walks are stored. Yes, off they go across the baseball field and onto a path in the woods that Bessie's been walking for 7 years. No leash, just a keen sense of where to go based on experience and instinct, wrapped up in scents and sounds that keep her on the trail. She is connected to Ashley by some invisible tether of trust. Heaven forbid Bessie stop for a minute doing the things she loves just because of a little complication. I watch her disappear on her walk, embarrassed that I ever complained about anything, and vowing never to do it again, ever. Bessie loves her holidays just like the rest of us. Anybody guess what holiday this might be? Washington's birthday is a very good guess. Think October. Halloween. That was her Halloween costume 2 years ago. This year I think she wanted to go with a younger look. So we indulged her. Bessie loves a party too, just like the rest of us. Happy New Year. I talked to her the night before, but she didn't listen. That's New Year's morning. Sleeping it off. I can't help but laugh when I see this. If we could put 200 of those little stickers on her face, if we said, Bessie, stay, we could just go to town. The one on the end of her nose is the one that she didn't knock it off with a paw or something. Springtime, Easter bonnet, or May Day, right? And this is Bess on her paddleboard. I still take her out on the paddleboard, but she also enjoys being on her by herself. Ashley and I get about 20 yards away from each other. This was in September. We just push her back and forth. And then we turn it around and push it the other way. Looks good in that hat, doesn't she? And obviously this is the book. I want to just stop for a second because it's a great story how we got to this point. I mentioned that I was keeping a diary about the lessons I was learning during Bessie's transition through and into blindness. A former student was going through a rough patch in his life. And so I went through the different chapters and said, you know, I think I'm going to send him this in an email. And I sent it off in an email. He lives in California. This is a boy who went to our school and was from a great family, but a family of little means. And he earned a scholarship to Phillips Exeter Academy out in the Seacoast after he graduated from our school. And then after he graduated from Exeter, we became president of the school. He earned a scholarship to Cal Berkeley out on the West Coast. Obviously a very smart, highly motivated kid. After he graduated from Cal Berkeley, he came back and spent a year in Boston working for City Year, volunteering in inner city high school to mentor those kids and say, no excuses. Look what I did. You can do it too. Let me show you. I'll help you. And then after that year of volunteering, he went to the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern to get his MBA. And now he's managing money for people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk out in California. He lives in a really nice apartment right on the beach on Hermosa Beach. So he's doing very, very well, but he's still enormously philanthropic and generous with his time and money. And he sent back an email when I sent him the message. He said, where'd this come from? I said, well, I wrote it, and here's the background. He said, send me the rest of it, would you please? So I sent all 176 pages out to him. And a few days later, he said, this can't sit on your laptop. It's got to become a book that people can read. There's too good a message here. And I said, okay, but he said, no, this is my chance to help you. You helped me when I was young and growing up. I'll help you now. And so with his help, we were able to produce the book and do it right. And we're still paying him back, but he has said, take your time. No hurry at all. The important thing is that we got the book done. So it's a great story of a student coming back in and helping a teacher. How many teachers are here? Okay, good. I'm going to come back to that. We go to schools with Bessie. I don't know if you can find her in here. There she is. This is at the Grantham Village School in Grantham, New Hampshire. And I'm going to come back to this picture in a little while because to me it's one of the best lessons that kids can learn from Bessie's story. When we go to schools, we try to focus on 3 primary things. I tell the kids, look around the room. Everybody here has insecurities, weaknesses, things that they're embarrassed about, that they try to hide under a bushel. And I tell them, don't. That's part of what makes you, you. That's part of the fuel in your tank. Use it to differentiate yourself. And then I point to the principal and I say, even Mrs. So-and-so has insecurities and weaknesses. And of course, their jaws drop. It's like, no, not her. I say, yep, and she nods her head to reinforce it. The second message is asking for help and accepting help is essential to being a successful, happy person. The happiest, most successful people I know are really good at saying, hey, I need some help here. Or when someone says to them, do you need help? They say, yes, I do. Thank you. It's not a sign of weakness. And we really try to reinforce that with the kids. Along with the message that if they know someone who needs help and they can't provide it, talk to your teacher or your parents. They'll know where to go. They'll know how to get that person some help. And then the last part of it, maybe the most important of all, going back to this picture, when Bessie shows up at these schools, the kids can't get close enough to her. They want to touch her. They look in her eyes. They ask all kinds of questions. They want to help. They're so interested. But I tell them, and they admit it, and they understand, if a blind person walked in and sat down near them, they'd freeze up. They wouldn't know what to say. They wouldn't know what to do. Same for a person with intellectual disabilities or someone with a handicap who was in a wheelchair or some other physical disability. And so I say to the kids, we try to we implore them, when you're around people with physical or intellectual handicaps or disabilities, it should bring out the same qualities that Bessie inspires. Show your genuine interest, offer to help, and show affection. And we tell kids, if you do, you're going to find a heaven on earth you didn't know existed. Respond to people the same way you responded to Bessie. And we think the message is getting through. We get postcards and notes from kids. This came from a 5th grade girl at the Alstead school, no, at the Violet school in Alstead. So that was her interpretation of the cover of the book. Bessie's story, watching the lights go out. This drawing, you just gotta keep your head up. From a 6th grade boy at the Tenney Grammar School in Methuen, Massachusetts. This was the thing he sent us when we left. Have you ever heard of needs.org? Anybody? They train world-class service dogs. These are dogs that are life companions with wounded veterans, blind people, people with autism, folks that need that kind of companionship to get through the day. We donate a portion of the proceeds from our book to needs.org. And they've partnered with us. They've sanctioned us and become advocates for Bessie's story. To show their appreciation, they named, you can't really read that, it's upside down, but that says Bessie. We've got, well, we had, this pup was in the program. This was taken when she was about 2 months old. Bessie made it all the way to about 1 year and 3 months until she flunked out. She got right up to the end, but the standard is so high. It's almost like if a car horn honks and the dogs turn their head, can't do it. So Bessie's living happily with a family in Massachusetts now, her host family. Needs called us and said, when she flunked out, would you like her? Would you like to have her? And we said, Ashley took the call, didn't even talk to me. She said, yes. And then we learned subsequently that we couldn't change her name. She was Bessie, and she had to be Bessie for all of her life. So we started playing out the scenario of having 10-year-old blind Bessie and 1.5-year-old full-sight, rambunctious black lab Bessie. And it just didn't seem fair to either one of them, that it would confuse them. So she's living happily with her host family now. But here's Bessie too. And I don't know, but I see so much intelligence in that face. I feel like a proud father. So we've got our fingers crossed that Bessie too will make it through and graduate and go on to be a neat service dog. So, what do you notice about this picture? It's my favorite picture in the whole slideshow. Yes?
That her eyes are full and then that one is blind.
Okay. Yeah, her eyes are full and normal and healthy here, and then they're blind over there. Anything else? Lost a little weight. Yeah, a lot more gray hair.
The wrinkle that you talked about in the beginning.
The wrinkle in her forehead. Yeah. I've got this picture up here because if you look closely, and I think if you measured it, you would verify, her eyes are open wider when she's blind. Brighter and wider. And if you think about that, that's inspirational. Her eyes are open wider when she's blind. If you can't see something, open your eyes wider. If you can't understand something, open your mind wider. If you can't accept another person for some reason, open your heart wider. And I just think that picture personifies the strength of character that Bessie has. If you look closely, Bessie's tooth on the, I think it's the bottom left canine, is cracked in half. On any particular day, you're apt to notice little nicks and scratches and cuts on her nose and around her eyes. Just tiny things. That's because she's a lab and she's out there collecting these minor wounds like they were trophies or medals. Because she refuses to stop all that stuff. This chapter is called A Retriever Forever. And the quote at the beginning, being fearless is not being 100% not fearful. It's being terrified, but you jump anyway. Taylor Swift said that. If you've ever seen Taylor Swift perform, I can't imagine that she's at all nervous before she takes the stage, but apparently she's terrified, and she goes anyway. One time, Bessie took off at full speed after a tossed ball, but in the wrong direction. Before I could stop her, she ran straight into a tree. Momentarily stunned, with blood dripping out of both nostrils, Bessie would not be consoled. She squirmed away from my sympathetic embrace and took off with her bleeding nose to the ground, eventually finding the ball, retrieving it, and dropping it at my feet. And as she stood there with her tail wagging, her watering blind eyes wide open, her body trembling with expectation, I had no option but to throw the ball again, which I did and which I will continue to do every day till my arm falls off or Bessie dies. She would never forgive me otherwise. Bessie refuses to back off. I sometimes wonder if she's stubborn, courageous, or just living blissfully in denial. But upon further reflection, who cares? She's full of joy, endlessly living in anticipation of the next adventure, and willing to get banged around a bit in the process. What would the alternative be? Living your life on a leash or tied to a chain so as not to bloody your nose or chip a tooth now and then? Bessie would never forgive me for choosing the safe route, cheating her out of a full life through my own caution. No thanks, not for Bessie and not for me. Chipped teeth, bloody noses, and a few scars are nothing compared to the unmet potential of a life spent looking out a window as a safe spectator. I'll take Bessie's example as a model for how to live. I mentioned before, a number of you were teachers, and that I would have another comment about that. I was an average at best student in my early years in college and in school. My mind was on other things than what was going on in the classroom. I had two teachers in the 7th and 8th grade, Mrs. Fitzmaurice and Miss Hickey. Fitz and Hicks, we called them, behind their backs, of course. And all you teachers, just so you know, your students have names for you. But they did something magical when I was a young boy. They inspired in me the idea that I could paint any picture I wanted in someone's mind with words. I wasn't good in art class. I wasn't gifted with a pen or a brush. But all of a sudden that idea hit a spark. I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. I can paint a picture in someone's head if I can find the right words to put together. And all of a sudden, the whole tone of my English homework changed. I'd saved it till the end of the day so I could do that and really enjoy it. And Fitz and Hicks had passed away. So when we visit schools, I tell the kids that I can't thank them now. I wish I could. Actually, they'd probably roll over in their grave if they saw this. But I tell the kids, you can thank your teachers. And don't just do it by saying thank you. Finish the sentence. Thank you for, and be very specific so the teachers know what you appreciate. And I think the message is getting through. I've got one more chapter to read. I hope I'm not boring you with this and that we're keeping your interest. I want you to do something that may make a few of you a little bit uncomfortable for a moment. But it wouldn't be a learning experience if we didn't do that, right? So it's my theory that each of us keeps packed away somewhere in our brains, I'm not sure which lobe, but it's something called a dog voice. You pull it up, as I've heard many of yours already, you pull it up as soon as a dog comes into the picture. You change the tone, inflection, you're a different person when a dog's in the area. I want you to spend the next 15 seconds talking to each other in your best dog voice. Come on. Nice job. You jumped right into that. I didn't hear anybody say something like, bad dog. Everything was kind of sweet, gentle, and encouraging. I think it would be a wonderful idea if you had a dinner party sometime, and you said the only rule is you have to speak to each other in your dog voice. I think adults can probably keep it up for about 20 seconds, and then they can throw up their arms.
Maybe after a bottle of wine.
Maybe, or a few rotten apples. We did that at a school with 300 kids in the audience. It took 10 minutes to put the lid back on. Get them to stop talking to each other in their dog voices. They had so much fun with it. So this chapter is called Talking to Dogs. And the quote at the beginning, "It's no coincidence that man's best friend cannot talk." Sometimes when watching particularly gruff, arrogant, or aggressive people in action, I wonder to myself what their dog voices sound like. What is President Donald Trump's dog voice? Or LeBron James, or Megyn Kelly's? How about Hillary Clinton? What is Hillary Clinton's dog voice like? Maybe along with releasing tax returns, candidates for elected office should release secretly recorded copies of their dog voices as a qualification. It might be interesting, especially when all those candidates were in the Democratic Party in the debates. I think maybe about 15 minutes in, the moderator should have said, for our next segment, we're going to play 20 seconds of each candidate's secretly recorded dog voice. Just think of the time and money that could have been saved. Just go right down the list. Nope, nope, maybe, yes, yes, no, definitely no. All you hear is their dog voice. You'll be able to make your decision. At least I would. I don't know. When your pet can't see, the vocabulary of your dog voice expands exponentially. I sometimes look over my shoulder before talking to Bessie because if someone overheard our conversation, they might lock me up. You see, when your dog is blind, you begin to think you have to interpret the world for her. Perhaps more alarming is you begin to believe your dog can't function without you, which is utter nonsense. There are a number of dog voices I use with Bessie. One of them is the be careful voice when it's necessary to alert her that the terrain is changing or that something's in her path. Then there's the end of day snuggle voice, which is the most private of all. I would pay a healthy ransom to prevent a recording of me talking to Bessie in this context from ever becoming public. Our dear friends Kevin and Diane sometimes watch Bessie for us when we travel. Bessie absolutely loves these people, partly because they have such wonderful dog voices. When Bessie hears Diane's velvety voice ask, "Are you coming to stay with Auntie?" She is overcome with joy and will abandon us without looking back. Kevin lets Bessie help him with the artwork. A neighbor listening to Kevin's ongoing dialogue was shocked to discover he was talking to a dog rather than a person. Kevin's intellect and sense of humor are sharp as a knife's edge, and Bessie seems to enjoy the enlightening aspects of his conversations with her, especially when blended with Diane's velvety, affectionate voice, which Bessie laps up like warm butter. I think we all need to be more in touch with our dog voices. When interviewing teaching candidates, I used to pay particular attention if a dog wandered into the picture, listening closely to the tone and melody of the candidate's dog voice. It provided an unfiltered look into the most empathetic and nurturing aspects of the person's soul. Marriage proposals should be delayed until thoroughly vetting the future spouse's dog voice. Did you two vet your dog voices before you got married?
Oh, yes.
You got married a year and a half, so. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
say
you're fine, you're fine.
The same goes for college admission, getting a driver's license, or agreeing to sit next to someone on a long airplane flight. Just think how much less pretentious we would all be if our dog voices were part of our profiles. Final thought. What's it like when someone speaks to you in their dog voice, and now you know? Feels pretty good, doesn't it? I think so. We've put a lot of information in the funnel tonight. If you think of a funnel when you got here, we started with that magic trick. And then we watched 3 or 4 minutes of videos, and I've read excerpts from various chapters in the book, and all of that is just the funnel swirling around. I wanted to drop out at the end, one little drop that you can take with you that's kind of the antidote for what can happen if you don't keep your spirits up. We said at the beginning that hopefully you'll leave here with a little more bounce in your step, a little more resilience, determination, enthusiasm. But you can't remember all of this. It's impossible. So I'm going to shorten it. And before I do that, I want to read one paragraph from the end of the book, or near the end of the book, that I think sums up Bessie's story best of all. And this is the underlying message, really. Bessie unknowingly floods me with daily reminders that each of us alone is in charge of our spirit and outlook. We can think of ourselves as poor, weak victims of unlucky turns, or the happy celebrants and survivors of life's endless challenges and tests. Our girl is my hero, plain and simple. I've been inspired by her enormous strength and embarrassed by my comparative lame weakness. So here's the message that I hope you'll all take with you. Be like Bessie. That simplifies it about as much as we can. And that's the message when we have, that we leave at schools, and we leave one of these posters for them. And it's working, I think, because teachers will get back to us and say, you know, I had this one kid that I was trying to get the message through, and finally I just said, look, it's really simple. Just be like Bessie. And the kid, yeah, okay, I think I got that. I can do that. I can try to do that. So that's the message. And now, remember the video where Bessie ate a cookie off her nose? To prove it's not trick photography. Now, I can't promise she'll be able to do this, but Ashley's going to take her off the leash. She'll find her way up here somehow. Bess, come here, girl. Come here, Bess. Hey, girl, come on. She'll bump into a few things along the way, but come on. Hey, girl. Whoops. There you go. Good job. Hey, girl. Turn around. Sit. Okay. You got this, Bess. You got this. Try to watch your eyes. Don't see anything. Okay. Does anybody have a question? Yes.
Her bell. Does she wear that so that you know where she is, or to ward off animals when she's out in the woods?
Both. When she could see, she and Ashley were walking in the woods one time, and a mother coyote came out of the woods. Well, first came the little cub, or the pup, and the pup was following us, or following Ashley and Bessie, and then the mother appeared and stalked them for about half a mile. So Ashley put the bell on to warn the animals that there's a dog coming. Subsequently, Bessie still likes to wander. She'll go out in the backyard and look over her shoulder and kind of sense is anyone around, and then dart into the woods and go off exploring. And so when she does that, we track her down, and the bell helps us find her. So it started out as one thing, became something else. Very observant.
What caused her white paws?
I think it was stress. I think that came because she has to think about where her foot goes every time she puts a paw down on the ground. Incidentally, she always leads with her right foot. When she goes upstairs, always right foot first. So I think she's a right-handed dog. But always, and same going downstairs. But it's very tender. The question here is she able to navigate the house? And yes, she is. And she knows where things are. It doesn't mean she doesn't bump into them, but she'll turn miraculously just before walking into something.
There was, when I was a child, they had Bassadone in my neighborhood who had some disease in the eyes, and the eyes were actually sewn up.
Yeah.
And this dog would come half a mile up the road, and we had a split rail fence, and just before he got to the split rail, he would duck underneath there.
Isn't it amazing?
And I didn't know if maybe the bell was maybe she was putting some like
Could be. It's possible, but she's the same way without it. Any other questions? Yes?
Any studies on whether blind dogs of the same breed have different mood sensitivities? Do they, will a blind dog be able to use the nose better? Or
I don't have the scientific answer, but
Can you repeat the question?
the question was, if there have been any studies about whether the dogs develop compensatory skills at a higher level, like can they see, can they hear, or smell things more acutely? And my answer is yes, based on this study. But I think it's true for anyone who's ever had a blind or a dog that was deaf or anything like that, that all of a sudden everything else kicks in at a higher level and enables them to negotiate their world better. Yes?
I knew a young woman. She was the niece of my brother-in-law, and she was blind. And she had this amazing dog, Daniel. He was a yellow lab. And
Was it her seeing eye dog? Her companion?
yes, seeing eye dog and companion, and she lived by herself.
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel was her guide through life, really.
Yeah.
And they went on a cross-country bus trip and went all over and went to different cities, and amazing.
Yeah. It's
How much
it's-
trust on both sides.
Yes. Yeah, both sides. So we are happy to sell books, and they're $17 for paperbacks, $22 for the hardcover. And I'll personally write a message, try to make it kind of a connection between us. I also take credit cards, and I just, fair warning, I won't make this mistake again, but the first time I ever used the little device that plugs into my cell phone, I sold a $22 hardcover book for $2,200. True story. My friend emailed me later that night and said, you know, it's a good book, but it's not worth $2,200. I said, I only have to sell a few of them. But it was easy to fix it, but I will, if you buy with a credit card, I'll show you the amount. Yes, what was your question?
I have a question. You said 3 or several of the other dogs were sick, they were also blind.
Yeah, 3 others besides Bessie were blind.
I just want to say that Bessie was the lucky one to get you in.
I appreciate that. That's very nice of you, but and I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I want to, for the teachers in the room especially, we were at a school in, I don't want to say the town because I don't want to single out anybody in particular, a small town in New Hampshire. And at the end, I'd open up the floor for questions. And Over here in the back, the 7th grade boys were gathering, and they're in the back row. And anyone who's ever been a teacher knows that that's tiger country. If you're a visiting presenter, be careful asking the 7th grade boys if they have a question. They can put you right in your place. This boy raised his hand and he said, if you could undo Bessie's blindness, would you? Right, 12 and a half years old. If you can undo Bessie's blindness, would you? My initial reaction was no, I don't think it would. This is the dog she sort of destined to be, and I think her life, I don't know if her life would have been as meaningful if she could see all the way. But I just thought that was a beautiful question for a young boy to ask, and thought about it a lot too, on a larger scale. You know, not just Bessie, but for all of us. You know, would we do those things over, change them? I don't know.
Our daughter and her daughter, our granddaughter, have had dying eye dogs as puppies. And
While they were being trained?
Pardon?
While the dogs were being trained?
Yes, as
Yeah.
puppies, and first our daughter did, and she had a yellow lab.
Uh-huh.
And it took hours and hours of training and rules that they had, and
Yes.
what you had to do and how much time you had to play with them. Well, the yellow lab went through and went away for about a year to go to school and everything, and then they got a phone call to say he didn't make it.
Didn't make it.
So my granddaughter
High
decided
bar.
she would do the same thing, and she got a black lab. He's so handsome, you can't imagine how handsome he is. And she took him to college with her and all around so he'd be socialized. He went away for a year. He sat down on the stage the day of testing and got spooked by a stuffed turtle. And the other one, the yellow lab, peed on every corner where the blind person was trying to get him to go across the street. So now they have 2 seeing eye dogs in their house.
Yeah, well, I don't want to keep you any longer than you planned, but you've been a great audience. Thank you so much.